So, 3D cycles. Periods of time when 3D movies are a thing and people try to sell you 3D stuff. The last 3D cycle had TVs that were 3D. We have a 3D TV at home, but it's broken, it's old. The problem with the last 3D cycle was, like, advertisers showed 4K TVs, but they didn't specify that the 3D is 1080p because you're using 2 times 1/4 the pixels, or like half the pixels. You're not showing a 3D. You're not using the full resolution of your TV to show the movie, is what I'm saying. Like, you're not getting a 4K movie, you're getting a 1080p movie. Also, streaming services didn't have the bandwidth for high quality 3D movies back then. And your computer didn't have the processing power, to manage high quality 3D movies. So all these technological limitations and a lack of corporate interest in delivering something useful to the consumer. And it fizzled out. Now we have like a certain backlog of 3D movies, and some movies are still 3D. You can buy 3D glasses for cheap, sure. But like, instead of 3D, you can just go VR. And that's one of the reasons why the next 3D cycle, at least in my opinion, will stick a little bit. Because cheaper cameras, relatively cheaper, it's still $5,000, but the EOS R5 already has a 3D lens for it. So you can actually make 3D movies at a budget. You're limited to one lens right now, but in the near future, you're probably gonna get a whole bunch of 3D lenses. There's basically 3 lenses that filmmakers usually use: 45, 50, and 85. And with the higher resolution of cameras these days, you can shoot 8K to shoot 2 images of 4K video. TVs have become sort of useless to most people, except with consoles getting a certain level of power. It means that the newest TVs can do high refresh rate videos, 4K, at a reasonable enough price. So I'm currently using a 55-inch Ambilight TV. That means that it casts light behind itself, so it's super cool looking. It has Dolby, it has high frame rate. It is something that I can use for gaming comfortably. It's cost me like the equivalent of 700 euros, which is a lot for a TV, but if you're buying a new TV, you want something quality, and 700 euros for something that is clear enough to use as a monitor just makes sense. Right. If you have the money, if you're of a class of person who buys 3D Blu-ray stuff, and you're not just pirating stuff, like a high refresh rate TV makes sense for you. And of course, 10-year-old computers can handle most office tasks easy, so why not buy yourself a quality TV instead of something with lower frame rate? If the next 3D cycle starts, the equivalent of a high refresh rate TV, the difference in pricing, which is like about, I think, 250 to 300 euros difference in pricing. Let's say 300 euros difference in pricing would be about the difference between a regular TV and a 3D TV. So you'd have the option of a 3D TV for an extra $300, or a high refresh rate TV, or a high refresh rate 3D TV, which is probably gonna be like $1,000, and then go down to like 900 euros and whatever. But if you have a certain backlog of 3D movies, and they suddenly start streaming, and people suddenly start advertising 3D, it's even in like 10 years, it would be at least a quarter. Let's say VR drops in price by like half. You're still getting a better, cheaper experience from a 3D TV. And I'm not saying that it's going to be like a total market option or whatever, but something like VR, like, where say, like, 1 in 10 people gets one. I definitely see a future for the next 3D cycle. And when that happens, I would like to see some games have 3D monitor features so that you can actually interact with objects, like stick a camera to monitor where to aim the visuals, how to calibrate the visuals relative to your position in the room, and you can interact with 3D objects, basically. And I think that would be a hell of a lot more fun than trying to just interact with the screen without the 3D, because your head might even, you're not really doing anything. But if it's 3D objects, you can pull, push, and your cameras now have a higher pixel density. So cheap, higher pixel density cameras for your console are more accurate. So I definitely see some sort of future for the next 3D cycle if it's handled properly. And that's what I think.